I'm gonna go to Gabe because I just find this to be like really easy to deal with. So Gabe wants to talk about how atheists have no objective morality or standards, so they cannot, talk about like misogyny and that homophobia is wrong and stuff like that. Okay. Do you want to elucidate on that before we tell you why that's kind of confused?
Hey, Justin.
Oh, there he is.
I wanted to ask, how do you respond to like a Christian that says,
I see.
Homophobia, slavery, and misogyny is wrong because atheists have no objective moral standards to.
Can I stop and just to directly apologize to you, because I've gotten confused with the John thing, the agnostic thing, and then the Chuck thing, where people have been putting what they are and then just giving us a total curveball. So I was in the same realm there, and I was like, I should have anticipated that maybe you were saying, hey, this is a kind of a typical cliche that's presented. So apologies to you. I wanted to make sure that I got that out to you. So thank you. But yeah, I don't know, Justin, do you want to go first on that? I can probably won't shut up about it. So maybe
I can summarize my position really easily. So my position is quite simple. If people say that, we don't have a claim to objective morality, I agree. I personally don't believe that objective morals exist. If they do exist, it's on somebody to tell us what they are and how they know what they are. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is people just want objective morals to exist so that they can point to other people and say that behavior is bad, and it's bad because of this objective standard. But no one can find that objective standard. I understand that it's uncomfortable to realize that morals are inherently social constructs that are subjective in nature. I get it. I know how frustrating that is. But we have no evidence to the contrary. Now, when I tell someone like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, I am taking into account that this is my opinion, but it just happens to be that my opinion is formed based on past experience and data points and other people's experience, and the fact that as social species that have adapted to our environment and have thrived using these social constructs, when we abandon them, when we abandon some of these moral concepts that have propelled our species to where we are today, then we can expect that our species would die out. And that's inherently something that I think everyone can agree we don't want. We don't want the human race to die out. So when we use morals, just know that I know for sure that they're subjective, and I'm okay with that.
And so I'm like not different from Justin, so I'll take it in different routes so that we can cover a little bit more basis. So it'll be we're not just saying the same thing. Tend to agree with a lot of what you said. The one thing I'd make a difference on is that in the past, I think I've called myself like a subjectivist. I actually don't ascribe to like any of those views because like through my reading on this, it's been pointed out to me on that when you make certain claims like a subjectivist or an error theorist, what comes packaged with that is like a semantic thesis about how people are using the language. I don't think there's a fact of the matter about like when people use moral language that they mean it in like this subjectivist sense, or they mean it in this relativist sense, or whatever kind of, or a realist sense. I think it's like a mix. It's like an indeterministic kind of thing. We can't really, it's going to be case by case. So I think a lot of the moral philosophy there is confused. Now that said, there are views like moral realism that like or moral naturalism or Cornell realism or Jackson realism, or not too well read up on these views. But there are views that don't have God, and there are what are called stance-independent moral facts, which is what you'll see in the metaethical literature. You'll see this term a lot, stance-independent moral facts or stance-independent like normative facts. And that's just like saying like mind independent essentially, or like, the shoe exists independent of you. So it's independent of your opinion or your stance about it. I think that that type of view is like on its face, if we could be charitable and make sense of moral realism, that view is perfectly compatible without a God, right? It seems very hard though on the opposite end when you have God as a subject or an agent in those things, like the truth maker of those moral propositions are going to be like desires or things constitutive of his nature. And so it seems like really hard to square that away with some type of objectivism. So I think that really what's going on is that most theists are presenting some type of subjective metaethical view, not realizing it. And an atheist is perfectly, like Sam Harris or someone, I disagree that he's actually establishing a realist view. I think he's just an anti-realist and is confused. But someone like himself is perfectly fine to go out and like pursue this, stance independent notion of moral facts. I know this is long-winded, but I want to say that a friend of mine, Lance Bush, who does like work on this and like moral, he's got a PhD in like moral psychology. He's a moral philosopher. He does like actual work on this in like the kind of empirical study realm, and shows why he thinks that there's a lot of issues when they do these surveys. And I think like he makes a really good point. He says that when you talk about realism, it's either just going to be something trivial, like something that maximizes our well-being. I can get behind that, but that's not realism. That's just our shared desires and values. It's going to either be gibberish, right? It's going to be unintelligible what you're saying. Like removing the concept of like referentiality to tallerness. Like if I say Justin's taller, and then I go, well, he's not taller than anything else, or he's not taller than he was last week. He's just taller, right? That concept seems really hard to understand. And I think similarly is like the same thing's the case with like morality. The second you untether it from our mind, from our stances, it's not even really clear what you're saying. And that leaves us with the third kind of category I think that these claims will fall into, which is that they're just false. Someone will just say, well, God exists and moral facts only exist because of God. Well, I don't think God exists. I think that those views are false. But that said, I think you can cover pretty much every bit there, right? You can be a subjectivist, a relativist, you could be a realist. None of that matters. Someone's going to have to show a contradiction in the propositions. God doesn't exist and there are stance-independent moral facts. That's their task, and they're not going to be successful at delivering the contradiction in that. So, sorry, long-winded to say you can have it either way. I just think it's unintelligible when people talk about realism. It just sounds like you're saying Justin's taller, but there's no like referentiality built into that concept. I've heard someone use this before, and I really gravitated towards that because it just seems like I don't really know what taller is unless it's tethered to like something like taller than something,
Okay. What literature would you recommend for like metaethics?
Well, so like yeah, I mean, I would look at like any, like you can look at like really just any like metaethics, like kind of generic, like kind of introduction to metaethics that's going to help you. But there are people like Michael Huemer that I don't agree with that are like atheists, but they're also realists, and they give arguments for their view. I think he kind of has this like phenomenal conservatism view, which is this idea that like your intuitions are justifiers absent defeaters. And so I think he kind of has, from what I understand, this kind of basis of like that these are intuitive and that there's no defeaters for these or something. But he's really good at writing for someone that's like new to philosophy. So I really suggest, even though I disagree with his views, I suggest that he's probably good at an introduction level there. But I'm also kind of bored with metaethics, so my kind of run out very quick on it. I kind of have a surface level knowledge on it. So.
Okay. Also, this particular question says you can't do science without accepting God. How could I respond to that?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I did want to add one thing to that, because your whole thing was, how can you say it's wrong? You have to. This is my bad. I'm like not getting it all straight, so I want to make sure I get this for you. If someone says it's wrong, ask them what they mean. Do you mean that stance independently wrong or stance dependently wrong? Because I can say, I think homophobia is wrong. And they ask me why. I go, well, it's indexed to me. It's indexed to my desires. I think it's wrong, right? And I can give you the reasons, right? Or I see a puppy get kicked and I go, well, I can't even give you reasons. I just intuit that that's wrong. I don't reason myself into that. That's wrong to me. But when they ask like, you can't say that's wrong, I just fucking did it, right? I just expressed to you brute psychological facts about me that I don't like those things, right? So the mystery to me just goes away.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I was like, oh yeah, this whole needs to be tied back to how can you say something like homophobia is wrong? Well, you don't want to entangle wrongness with like two different senses of the term. Do you mean objectively wrong? Do you mean subjectively wrong? Or in the anti-realist sense? If you mean it in the anti-realist sense, I just did it. If you mean it in the realist sense, I don't believe in that. So how is that supposed to like be hung over my head?
Okay. All right. Well, I guess
Anything
thank you
else?
very much. Have a good show.
Yeah.